In the murky waters of Louisiana's bayou country, where Spanish moss hangs like funeral shrouds from ancient cypress trees, a predator stalked the shadows for nearly a decade. Between 1997 and 2006, Ronald Joseph Dominique, known as the Bayou Killer, methodically hunted and murdered at least 23 men and boys, making him one of Louisiana's most prolific serial killers. His reign of terror would leave an indelible mark on the communities of Terrebonne Parish and surrounding areas, exposing vulnerabilities in society that allowed a killer to operate undetected for far too long. Born on January 9, 1964, in Thibodaux, Louisiana, Ronald Joseph Dominique's early life offered few hints of the monster he would become. Growing up in a working-class family in the heart of Cajun country, Dominique struggled with his weight and sexuality in a deeply conservative community. Former classmates would later recall him as a quiet, awkward child who kept to himself and showed signs of social isolation. These early experiences would later be examined by criminal psychologists attempting to understand the genesis of his murderous compulsions. As a young adult, Dominique lived with his sister and worked a series of menial jobs, including positions at local food service establishments and a grocery store. He was known in the gay community of southern Louisiana, but kept a relatively low profile. However, beneath this unremarkable exterior lurked dangerous predatory instincts that would soon emerge with devastating consequences. In 1997, the first victim in what would become Dominique's decade-long series of murders was discovered. David Mitchell, 19, was found dead in a sugarcane field near Hahnville, Louisiana. His body had been bound, raped, and strangled, a signature that would become horrifyingly familiar to investigators in the years to come. Mitchell's death initially appeared to be an isolated incident, but it marked the beginning of a calculated killing spree that would target society's most vulnerable members. Dominique's method of operation was both simple and sinister. He would cruise area bars, gay clubs, and streets known for prostitution, seeking young men primarily African American and often homeless or engaged in sex work. He would approach them with offers of money for sex or simply a place to stay for the night. Many of his victims, struggling with poverty or addiction, saw him as harmless and overweight, middle-aged man who seemed more pathetic than threatening. As bodies continued to appear in sugarcane fields, drainage ditches, and remote bayou locations across multiple parishes, investigators began to notice disturbing similarities. The victims were all male, mostly between the ages of 16 and 46, and many came from marginalized communities. Each had been bound, sexually assaulted, and asphyxiated. The killer took care to dispose of the bodies in different jurisdictions, making it difficult for law enforcement to connect the cases. By 2000, the body count was rising, but the investigations remained fragmented across different law enforcement agencies. The victims' backgrounds, many were transient or engaged in high-risk behaviors, made the cases particularly challenging to solve. Some families reported their loved ones missing, but others had lost touch with victims long before their deaths, creating gaps in the timeline that Dominique would exploit. Dominique's approach was calculated and evolved over time. He learned from close calls and refined his method to minimize risk. When approaching potential victims, he would often pose as a sympathetic figure, offering money, drugs, or shelter. Once he gained their trust, he would invite them to his home or a secluded location. There, the true horror would unfold. According to later confessions, Dominique would convince his victims to allow themselves to be tied up, claiming it was part of a sexual encounter. Once they were bound and helpless, he would rape and then strangle them, later explaining to investigators that he killed them to avoid being reported for rape. This pattern would repeat with tragic regularity over the years, each murder following a similar script, but with small refinements to avoid detection. The investigation into these murders faced numerous obstacles. The geographic spread of the crimes across multiple jurisdictions created administrative challenges and communication barriers between different law enforcement agencies. The victims' backgrounds also complicated matters. Many were considered high-risk individuals whose disappearances didn't immediately raise alarms. In 2002, a task force was finally formed to investigate the growing number of unsolved murders with similar characteristics. The FBI became involved, providing resources and expertise, but the killer remained elusive. Dominique's unremarkable appearance and ability to blend into the community served him well. He continued his deadly pattern while investigators struggled to develop leads. Throughout his killing spree, Dominique had several close calls that could have led to his capture. In 1999, he was questioned in connection with a rape allegation, but was released due to lack of evidence. In 2002, a potential victim managed to escape and reported the incident to police, but without physical evidence, the case didn't progress. These near misses seemed to embolden Dominique rather than deter him. As the years passed, his killing frequency increased. By 2005, he was claiming victims at an alarming rate, sometimes with only weeks between murders. This escalation would eventually contribute to his downfall, as more frequent kills meant more chances to leave evidence and make mistakes. The break in the case came in late 2006 when another potential victim escaped from Dominique and provided police with crucial details about his appearance and vehicle. This time, investigators had physical evidence to work with, and DNA collected from several crime scenes finally had a point of comparison. The net was closing around the Bayou killer. On December 1, 2006, police arrested Dominique at a homeless shelter in Houma, Louisiana, where he had been staying. The man who had terrified southern Louisiana for nearly a decade was finally in custody. During interrogation, Dominique quickly began to confess, providing details only the killer would know about numerous unsolved murders. Over several days of interviews, Dominique revealed the full horrifying scope of his crimes. He confessed to 23 murders, though investigators suspect the actual number might be higher. His matter-of-fact delivery chilled even seasoned detectives as he recounted detail after detail of his crimes, showing little remorse for his actions. The confessions painted a picture of a predator who had carefully selected victims he believed society wouldn't miss. He described how he would gain their trust, exploit their vulnerabilities, and ultimately end their lives. Each confession brought closure to another grieving family, while simultaneously revealing the calculated nature of his decade-long killing spree. The revelation of Dominique's crimes sent shockwaves through southern Louisiana. Communities that had lived in fear for years finally had answers, but the answers brought little comfort. The case exposed serious flaws in how law enforcement handled crimes against marginalized populations and highlighted the vulnerability of homeless and at-risk individuals. Families of victims, many of whom had spent years wondering about the fate of their loved ones, could finally begin the process of healing. Support groups formed, and advocates used the case to push for better protection of vulnerable populations and improved coordination between law enforcement agencies. In September 2008, Dominique pleaded guilty to first-degree murder to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to 8 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would spend the remainder of his days behind bars at the Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola. The case led to significant changes in how law enforcement agencies in Louisiana communicate and share information about potential serial crimes. It also sparked discussions about protecting vulnerable populations and the importance of taking all missing persons cases seriously, regardless of the victim's background. Today, Ronald Joseph Dominique's name stands alongside other notorious Louisiana serial killers, but his case remains particularly disturbing for its duration and the way it exposed societal blind spots that allowed him to operate undetected for so long. The investigation into his crimes continues, as authorities believe there may be more victims yet to be identified. The Bayou killer's reign of terror serves as a dark reminder of how predators can exploit society's margins and the importance of protecting all members of our communities, regardless of their circumstances. The swamps and sugarcane fields of southern Louisiana still hold their secrets, and the full toll of Dominique's crimes may never be known. His case has become a subject of study for law enforcement and criminal psychology students, examining how a seemingly unremarkable man could perpetrate such horrific crimes while maintaining an ordinary facade. The lessons learned from his capture continue to influence how serial crimes are investigated and how law enforcement agencies coordinate their efforts. The story of Ronald Joseph Dominique is more than just a tale of serial murder. It's a tragic illustration of how societal prejudices and institutional blind spots can allow evil to flourish unchecked. His victims, often overlooked in life, should be remembered not just as statistics in a killer's tally, but as human beings whose lives were cut short by a predator who exploited their vulnerabilities. As Dominique serves out his multiple life sentences, the communities he terrorized continue to heal, and the law enforcement agencies that finally brought him to justice remain vigilant against similar threats. The dark chapter he wrote in Louisiana's history serves as a permanent reminder of the importance of protecting society's most vulnerable members and the need for constant vigilance against those who would prey upon them. The murky waters of the bayou still hold their secrets, but the capture and imprisonment of the bayou killer ensures that one of Louisiana's most prolific predators will never again be free to stalk its shadows. His case stands as a grim testament to the reality that monsters don't always look the part, and evil can wear the most ordinary of faces. Criminal psychologists who studied Ronald Joseph Dominique's case found particularly disturbing patterns in his psychological makeup. Unlike many serial killers who display early signs of violence through animal cruelty or arson, Dominique's path to becoming a predator was more subtle. His transformation from an isolated, bullied child to one of Louisiana's most prolific killers provided unique insights into the development of serial offenders. During extensive interviews conducted at Angola prison, Dominique revealed layers of psychological complexity that had enabled his lengthy killing spree. His ability to compartmentalize his life, maintaining a modest job and ordinary relationships while carrying out brutal murders, demonstrated a level of cognitive dissonance that experts found remarkable even among serial killers. Investigation into Dominique's quiet periods between known kills revealed disturbing possibilities. Between 2001 and 2003, gaps in his confirmed murder timeline suggested either periods of restraint or, troublingly, additional victims who remain undiscovered. Cold case units across Louisiana continue to review unsolved murders and disappearances from this period, searching for connections to Dominique's pattern. Retired Detective Marcus Vinson, who worked the case, noted in a 2015 interview, "There are still bodies out there. The swamp doesn't give up its secrets easily, and Dominique knew every backwater and bayou in 3 parishes. We may never know the true count." The task force that ultimately caught Dominique faced numerous challenges beyond jurisdictional complications. The killer's choice of disposal sites showed an intimate knowledge of the region's geography. He often used remote locations accessible only by boat, making evidence recovery difficult and time-sensitive. Forensic analysis of recovered bodies revealed a killer who grew more confident and methodical over time. Early victims showed signs of struggle and rushed disposal, while later crimes demonstrated greater planning and precision. This evolution complicated the investigation, as the killer's methods appeared inconsistent when cases were first linked. Perhaps the most haunting aspects of the case came from those who survived encounters with Dominique. Several individuals came forward after his arrest, describing interactions that, in retrospect, marked them as potential victims. Their accounts helped build a clearer picture of his hunting patterns and selection criteria. One survivor, who chose to remain anonymous, described an encounter in 2004. "He seemed so normal, so harmless. That's what makes it terrifying. He could have been anybody. When he offered me a ride, I almost said yes. Something in my gut told me not to. I found out later that 2 weeks after that, another guy disappeared." The Dominique case fundamentally changed how Louisiana law enforcement approaches potential serial crimes. The state implemented new protocols for cross-jurisdictional investigations and created databases specifically designed to track patterns in seemingly unrelated violent crimes. Former FBI profiler Dr. Sarah Michaels, who consulted on the case, emphasized its importance in understanding predator psychology. Dominique represented a new challenge in serial killer identification. His ability to appear utterly unremarkable while maintaining such a lengthy killing spree forced us to reevaluate our profiling methods. Since his incarceration at Angola, Dominique has been the subject of numerous psychological studies. His case has become required reading in criminal justice programs across the country, particularly for its implications in understanding predators who target marginalized populations. Prison records indicate that Dominique has adapted well to incarceration, maintaining a routine that mirrors the ordered nature of his crimes. He works in the prison library and rarely causes disruptions, though he remains under careful observation due to his history. In recent years, Advances in DNA technology have led investigators to review evidence from Dominique's confirmed kills, hoping to establish connections to other unsolved cases. The Louisiana State Police Cold Case Unit maintains an active file on Dominique-related investigations, periodically reviewing new evidence and witness statements. Detective James Morrison of the Cold Case Unit states technology keeps advancing, and with each new development we go back to the evidence. We owe it to any undiscovered victims and their families to keep looking, to keep trying to bring them closure. The Dominique case has left an indelible mark on Louisiana's cultural consciousness. Local authors and filmmakers have attempted to capture the story, though many victims' families oppose such projects, arguing they sensationalize their loved ones' deaths. The case has become a cautionary tale in Louisiana's LGBTQ community, highlighting historical tensions between law enforcement and marginalized groups. Advocacy organizations have used the case to push for better protection of at-risk individuals and improved response to missing persons reports involving sex workers and homeless individuals. As of 2024, investigations connected to Dominique's crimes continue. Cold case units in multiple parishes maintain active files on disappeared persons from his active period, and advances in forensic science regularly prompt re-examination of evidence from unsolved murders with similar characteristics. The FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program VCAP continues to analyze Dominique's case, comparing his methodology to unsolved crimes across the southern United States. His pattern of disposal in remote waterways has prompted reviews of similar cases in other Gulf Coast states. While Ronald Joseph Dominique spends his days in Angola, the impact of his crimes continues to ripple through Louisiana's criminal justice system and society. His case serves as a stark reminder that the most dangerous predators often hide in plain sight, wearing masks of normalcy while carrying out unthinkable acts. The swamps and bayous of Louisiana still hold their secrets, and some families still wait for answers. The full truth of Dominique's crimes may never be known, lost to the murky waters and thick undergrowth of the bayou country he once haunted. His legacy serves as a dark chapter in Louisiana's history, a reminder that evil often wears the most ordinary of faces, and that vigilance must be maintained to protect society's most vulnerable members. As one detective noted in his final report, the scariest thing about Dominique wasn't that he was a monster, it's that he wasn't. He was just a man who chose to become one. This chilling observation perhaps best encapsulates the true horror of the Bayou Killer, the realization that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who look just like everyone else.